Howdy. Welcome to Storytime. I'm Murph. In this edition of Storytime, we are going to be listening to episode 3 of The Lands, which is part 3 of chapter 1, Something is Happening. And boy, something is happening. Let's go over some of the stuff that's been going on in the lands. First of all, strange things have been happening. You had a number of citizens just hear moans and groans and lose their breath or pass out. So something definitely is happening. And that all happened around the same time that Ava, Mitch, and Peter got knocked unconscious by something happening in Hubland just after they relieved Victor and Tom from their positions there. Maddog he's still at River's Edge Terrace playing his game of Hold'em. But it appears that there's a couple of guys who are looking to get him and maybe even kill Drake. Also, we have Captain Marley, who is passed out in the pirate's lair. And then finally, we have Gonzo sending Grimmer to get Bob. So let's see how it all pans out in episode 3. Let's get to it. 1 and a 2, and away we go. Welcome to the lands. Episode 3, Chapter 1, Something is Happening, Part 3. This episode's quote, "I highly doubt it, but you do whatever you want to do. Nobody cares anymore." Captain Marley. Maddog watched as Doc Moran headed into River's Edge Terrace. Took a drag on his cigarette. I guess I should have listened to Mahone and kept the spirit alive. He took one last puff of his cigarette, then flicked it over the porch rail into the street. He looked around, then followed Doc Moran into the River's Edge Terrace. Just as Maddog walked through the door, 2 large men moved from the river towards River's Edge Terrace. "You sure that was Maddog?" one of them said to the other. "Oh yeah, that was Maddog," the other answered as they stopped by the stairs leading to the front entrance. "I recognize that disgusting habit of flicking his cigarettes away. It's him." "Then Gonzo's reward is good as ours. What's the plan?" The other man looked to his friend to the left of him and said with a smile, "We're going to go in there and tell him he better come quietly with us. Otherwise, we make him come with us." "Well, what if Drake's in there?" The man smiled. "We kill him." Just as he said that, a club came flying down on his hand, knocking the gun right out of it. The man screamed just as the club came around and whacked him in the chest. He fell to the ground. Before the other man could get his gun out of the holster, the club was thrust into his gut. The man bent over. As the club was moving upward to hit him in the head, the man grabbed it. He wrestled it away from Drake and threw it so far it went into the river. But before he could do much more of anything, Drake's fist smashed him right in the face. As he went flying backwards, Drake placed his foot on top of the first man he knocked to the ground, who was lying there groaning. He then drew his gun and pointed it at the other guy who was starting to stand. Drake gave him a stare and made a motion with his gun. The man slowly removed his gun and threw it towards Drake. "Geez, Drake," the man on the ground moaned. "We really weren't going to kill you." "Yeah," the other man said. You know we just talked big. Please don't kill us." Drake removed his foot and kicked the guy on the ground in his side. He got up and ran to his friend. Drake then gave them both a good glare. It was a look that told them they better leave and not come back. The 2 men turned and ran as fast as they could away from Drake. Drake smiled, picked up the 2 guns and checked them out. He shoved the fancy one in a holster he had hidden on his back. He then walked over to the river and dropped the other gun in there. He took a look around, and, as usual, no one even noticed him. He walked back to the shadow of the willow tree. Victor and Tom rode in the darkness towards Techland. You think something's really happening, or is the captain just being cautious? Tom asked his riding partner. I mean, when was the last time we had security status D? Who knows, Victor responded. I think this is just his way of getting some of us old-timers back out here in the dead of night. Yeah, it's been a while since you and I have done this run at night, Tom said. We had some good times out here, that's for sure. Back in the day when we could have fun. I'm not really sure if we ever really were allowed to have fun. We just did, Victor responded, the two men laughing as they nodded to each other. Times have changed, Victor continued. The land just ain't what they used to be. He then cocked his head and sat up in his saddle. There was a strange noise coming from behind them. You hear that? He asked. The noise was getting louder and approaching them. Both soldiers grabbed their sidearms and turned to look behind them. There was only darkness of the neutral lands, but there was definitely something approaching them. Suddenly, out of the darkness, two riderless horses ran by them at full speed. Even at the speed they were going, Tom immediately recognized the saddle of one of the horses. Wasn't that Peter's pillows? Tom asked. The two men looked at each other. Let's go, Victor yelled. They both spurred their horses to go after the two horses that ran by them. Victor gave a loud whistle that caused the runaway horses to slow down. As they caught up to them, each rider grabbed the horse's reins. This is definitely Peter's pillows, Victor said. This is probably the newbies. The two stared at each other. Simultaneously, they turned and spurred their horses and went full speed in the direction of the darkened hubland. Captain, we must return fire! What? Captain Marley gave out a loud snore that caused him to open his bloodshot eyes and to let out a little laugh. The snore and the laugh seemed to surprise him. He fought to focus his eyes, blinking wildly to fight off the effects of the alcohol. He shook his head, let out a burp, and stared at his pint that was on the table in front of him. He was surprised to see it full. He reached for it, but before he could grab it, a mouse came around from behind it and let out a squeak. Squeak! The pirate slowly put his finger to his mouth. Shh, he said to the mouse. The mouse looked old. Its whiskers were long and tattered, and there was a lot of gray mixed in with its natural light brown hair that was around his nose and face. Its eyes, however, were black as coal. He twitched his whiskers and said, Squeak! The pirate shook his head. Shh, he said, looking around the room to make sure no one else was listening. Ah, nobody cares, Mouse. Nobody cares anymore. Mouse stood up. Squeak! 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 The pirate shook his head. Oh, okay, whatever. But just so you know, I almost died just now. The mouse rolled its eyes. Squeak! Squeak! The pirate put his hand up to stop the mouse from squeaking. Shh! Not you too. Squeak! 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 I highly doubt it. But you do whatever you want to do. Nobody cares any more. Mouse stared at the pirate, almost looking sorry for him. But for some reason, Mouse was excited. He ran to the end of the table, jumped down to the floor, and ran out the door of the pub. Captain Marley stared at the full pint in front of him. He smiled, grabbed it, then closed his eyes, leaned his head back, and passed out. His mind once again went back to reliving the past. Rosie's Tavern was hidden deep inside the far end of the enormous castle of the kingdom. It wasn't as hopping as River's Edge Terrace or as ritzy as the Horseshoe, but it was the only restaurant open in the kingdom so early in the morning. People from all over the land visited when they felt the need to get away. Rosie, its owner, was all about having a good time, with good food and good drinks. She was a dark-skinned woman with the whitest teeth around. When she smiled, it radiated out from her, which in turn made you smile. When you were around Rosie, it was difficult to be in a bad mood. The walls of Rosie's taverns were decorated in swords and knives and sabers from all over the lands. There was a mix of candle-lit lanterns and light fixtures with dim lights. There were also heads of animals that were prized kills of some of the many regulars who were happy to have their trophies on display. The tavern was dimly lit, with most of the light coming from an enormous chandelier of animal bones and lanterns that hung above the bar, which was situated in the middle of the tavern. When you entered Rosie's, there were some tables right in front of you. Then there was the bar. The bar was in the shape of a giant rectangle, with one of the short sides facing the door. The two long sides faced the booths that lined the walls to the left and right. Behind the bar were short and long tables, with some round tables hidden away in the corners of the back wall. Rosie's Tavern was a good place to disappear into, if that's what you wanted to do. It was a quiet morning at Rosie's. There were some patrons from the town in one booth, complaining about how King Michael was ignoring their complaints. At another booth was Sheriff Bob from the Western Territories. He was sitting with a couple of soldiers from the Neutral Lands Army and a guard from the Kingdom's regiment. Sheriff Bob was a tall, thin young man, just barely over 22 years old, with short, curly hair, which was hidden under his cowboy hat. Rosie was in the far back corner helping a group of guys who were barely visible in the shadows. "You know, Sheriff Bob, you really should consider joining the Neutral Lands Army," one of the soldiers said to the good sheriff. "It would definitely be better than what you're doing now." "The NLA?" the guard from the Kingdom's regiment asked. "Are you saying it'd be better for him to work for Captain Hobogon than to work for himself? If you're going to switch jobs, Bob, you should come over to the King's regiment." "He doesn't work for himself," the soldier of the NLA said to the guard. "He works for Gonzo." "That's not true," Sheriff Bob interrupted. "I work for the people of the Western Territories." "Oh, yeah, right," the soldier said. "Unfortunately, the people of the Western Territories work for Gonzo as well." All of them, except for Sheriff Bob, laughed. Just then, Rosie appeared at the table. "Sounds like this table is having a good old time," Rosie said with a big smile. "Of course we are," one of the soldiers said. "It's always a good time at Rosie's." "Darn right," Rosie yelled, "and y'all better keep it that way. Any of you sexy men need anything from me?" she asked with a big smile. "Some lovin'?" said another of the soldiers. "Don't you ask for nothing you can't handle, sweetheart," Rosie responded. The men all laughed. "I suppose we could use another round," the guard from the Kingdom's regiment said. "Now that's what I like to hear," Rosie exclaimed. Her face faded as she leaned into the guys at the table. "You are a lot more fun than those guys," she said as she motioned towards the table hidden in the shadows of the far corner. "Those are some creepy guys, especially the old dude." "Who are they?" Sheriff Bob asked. "I don't know," Rosie whispered, "but they've been hanging around here the last few days. They're all dressed up like cowboys, Sheriff Bob, so maybe you know them. But that old guy, ugh, he gives me the creeps." Sheriff Bob looked over to the far corner. It was so dark in that corner that he really couldn't see anything. The only thing that he could see was that it appeared that one or two of them were bald. "I really can't see them," Sheriff Bob said. "Well, let's just say they give me the heebie-jeebies," Rosie said with another exaggerated shiver. "Unlike you all, you make me feel like dancing." Rosie started dancing around as she headed towards the bar to pour them another pint. As she did, the front door opened and 4 men walked in. You could tell by the way they were dressed, in their white long-sleeved shirts and blue pants, that they were from the world. "Hey, hey, Rosie, my love," one of the men said. "It's your favorite patrons." "Well, it's about time y'all showed up. I was just about to close on account that I was falling asleep." She walked to the men and gave them a big hug. "I suppose y'all want your end of shift, end of the week usual?" "You bet," they answered. "Coming right up, sugars. Find yourselves a place to settle, and I'll be right with you." Rosie headed to the bar as the 4 men walked towards a booth. One of them caught sight of Sheriff Bob and the guys at his table. "Well, look what we have here," he said as he approached their booth. "Guys who couldn't handle working in the world. Hello, girls," he said to them. Sheriff Bob, the soldiers, and the guard did not respond. The 4 guys who worked at the World surrounded the booth Sheriff Bob was sitting at. "So, you guys think you're men enough to do what we do out there in the world?" None of them answered. Rosie didn't like how things were going, so she was trying to make their drinks as quick as she could. "Well, why don't you all find yourself a table, and I'll be bringing your drinks right to you," she yelled as she did what she could do to make their drinks as quick as she could. The men from the world didn't move. They stood at Sheriff Bob's booth, just staring at its occupants with disgust. "What about you, Sheriff Bob? Aren't you getting tired of that one-horse territory?" Sheriff Bob just stared at his drink. "How about you guys?" the man from the world said, pointing to the soldiers of the NLA. "Aren't you soldiers tired of playing around with Captain Hobogon and guarding dirt? When you gonna grow up and come join the real men?" "Oh, because what you do is so difficult?" a soldier from the NLA responded. "Try keeping all the land safe." "Oh, is that what you do? Riding around in the dirt all day?" the man from the world responded. "You think that's more difficult than guarding all the scumbags you guys arrest? We have to maintain the peace in a very dynamic world." He waited for some reaction from the guy sitting at the table, but there was nothing. The man pointed to Sheriff Bob. "And Sheriff Bob, when was the last time you did anything to save the day? When was the last time you even made an arrest?" "He could arrest you right now," the guard from the Kingdom's regiment said. "He has no jurisdiction here," the man from the world responded, sneering at Sheriff Bob. "No, I don't," Sheriff Bob replied, glancing up at the man from the world. "But my good friend General Nails does." "General Nails? He doesn't even set foot in the world. He's just as much a coward as the rest of you." Just then the front door to the tavern opened, and a silhouette of a man stood there. Silence fell over the tavern. The man from the world froze, then whispered to his companions, "Is that the Grim Reaper?" "Trouble comes knocking," the guard from the Kingdom's regiment mumbled. The figure entered Rosie's tavern and confirmed it was the Grim Reaper. The men from the world shrunk away from Sheriff Bob's booth and found their own booth to sit in. The group from the town got up, paid their tab, and quickly exited the tavern. All the other patrons just stopped talking and stared at the Grim Reaper as he walked towards the bar. The Grim Reaper was a young man by the name of Grimmer. He wasn't a very big guy, nor was he very old. He was in his mid-20s, slight build, with a constant smirk. And he was feared. Everyone knew of his reputation to kill first and ask questions later. How he was such a good shot and so calm and so quick, nobody knew. He was quick-thinking and not afraid to act. Everyone in Rosie's tavern was afraid he was there for them, except Rosie. "Now there is the most beautiful person in all the lands," Rosie yelled as she approached him. "Let me give you some sugar, love." Grimmer smiled and walked towards the bar. "I'll take a rain check, Rosie," Grimmer said. Slight murmurs started throughout the tavern. "Well, what is a hunk like you doing here? You come to sweep me off my feet, handsome?" Rosie asked. "Not exactly. I'm here for Sheriff Bob. He around?" Rosie flashed him a big smile as she got close to him. "You ain't planning on bloodying up my tavern, are you now? I'm already in hot water with the king. Don't need you making it any worse." "Nah, just need to talk to Bob." Sheriff Bob appeared next to Grimmer. He towered over Grimmer by a good 6 inches. Grimmer didn't care. He stared right into the sheriff's eyes, confident as ever. The sheriff took a sip of his coffee. "I take it you're here for me?" Sheriff Bob said. "You are correct," Grimmer answered, never losing his smirk. "Boss would like to have a word with you." Sheriff Bob took another sip of his coffee and glanced at the booth where he had been sitting. One of the soldiers of the NLA was nodding in his direction, as if to reaffirm about who he had said Sheriff Bob really worked for. "Must be important if he sent you all the way here to get me." "Must be," Grimmer replied. The murmur in the tavern was getting a little louder, with people starting to worry that there was going to be trouble. Rosie didn't like how serious it was getting. "Y'all better stop your worrying, you hear?" she yelled at everyone. "There ain't going to be no trouble here tonight. The Grim Reaper knows I'll have to give him a real whooping if he starts something." She leaned in and whispered to Grimmer, "You know I'm just saying that right. You know I'm scared to death of you." She stood up and addressed her patrons once again. "In fact, he says he's buying the next round." Everyone cheered as she leaned in and whispered to Grimmer, "Don't you worry none. I'm paying." Grimmer smiled, but never took his eyes off of the sheriff. Unless you want to pay," Rosie said. Grimmer shook his head. Just thought I'd ask. She looked at him and shivered. Oh, those dimples. You're just so gorgeous. She walked back to the bar to start serving drinks. The sheriff took another sip of coffee. You sure have a way with women, Grimmer. Break time is over, Sheriff, Grimmer said. I guess your master calls, the sheriff responded. He took the last big sip of his coffee and placed the cup on the bar. Well, let's see what fun and exciting things he has planned for me this time. Rosie watched as Sheriff Bob and Grimmer walked towards the door. Y'all come back and visit me, you hear? She called out to them. You know Rosie's Tavern is the best place in the kingdom, if not all the lands. As they exited, she said under her breath, Better than that dive the horseshoe, that's for sure. She looked at the closing door, hoping it wasn't the last time she saw Sheriff Bob. Victor and Tom rode with urgency. They did what they could to motivate their horses to run faster. Shouldn't we be able to see the statue? Tom asked his partner. Victor didn't answer. Yes, they should be able to see the statue, and that concerned him greatly. Yah! Was all Victor yelled as he tried to get his horse to go even faster. It was so dark that the two soldiers nearly ran into the base of the statue. They both pulled back on the reins of their horses and leapt off them. It was like their training kicked right in. They both grabbed the torch off the back of their horses with their left hands, their guns in their right hands. Right away, Victor saw Ava on the ground bleeding. He turned to Tom. Code Red and Code Blue, he yelled at Tom. Tom holstered his handgun and reached around his back and produced a bigger gun. He opened his jacket and pulled out 2 cartridges. He loaded one into the gun, held it high, and fired off a red flare. Then he reloaded the gun, lifted it high again, and fired off a blue flare. Victor had already checked the 3 unconscious soldiers and came up to Tom. All 3 of them are unconscious. Just then, Mitch began to stir. He moaned as he grabbed the back of his head. Both Victor and Tom went to him. What happened? Victor asked. I don't know, he answered. Were you attacked? Not really sure. A wind kicked up and the horses freaked out. Oh, man, I got thrown off of mine. Mitch tried to stand. Where are Peter and Ava? They're still unconscious, Victor said as he and Tom helped Mitch to his feet. I'm going to go around the base, Victor said to Tom. Victor grabbed his gun and slowly walked around the base of the statue. Was it like someone attacked you from behind? Tom asked. No, not really. This wild wind started up and blew out all the torches and... Tom! Victor yelled from the other side of the base. Tom, without any hesitation, ran around to the other side of the base. Mitch was standing there in darkness. He drew his gun. In the distance, he could see light from the torches of other soldiers who were riding towards Hubland. They had seen the flares and they were coming to help. Then Victor came around the base. Mitch, do you think you can ride? I think so, he answered, straightening himself up. Yeah, I think I can. You need to ride to Merchant Valley and get Captain Hovigan, and you need to do it as quickly as you can. Get going right now. Thank you for visiting the land. We hope you come visit us again soon.
Woo! Ride, Mitch, ride. Let's hope he gets to Captain Obegon quickly, and so that the good captain can come and figure out just what the heck is happening. Is it good or is it bad? I guess we'll find out in the next episode when Captain Hobogon arrives to find out what's going on. So, episode 3, we introduced to a couple of new characters. We meet Mouse, right? Not sure if Mouse is important in the lands. Don't know. We'll find out about that. And also we get introduced to Rosie, the owner of Rosie's Tavern in the Kingdom. She's a fun one and was very enjoyable to write, and hopefully we'll see more of her, but got to find out what goes on between Sheriff Bob and Gonzo, and I'm sure that will be coming up in future episodes. Before we sign off, I've got a message here from Captain Marley, from the Pirate Slayer. Captain Marley says, "Aye, if you want to spend more time in the lands, be sure ye subscribe and turn on your notifications to know when the next adventure occurs. Leave a comment if you want, but nobody cares anymore." And then he just kind of squiggles on down the card. Well, that's not true, Captain Marley. That's not true. We do care. So if you have something to say, put it there in the comments. Always interested. Want to thank you for spending some time in the lands, and hopefully you'll join us again real soon. Until the next time, remember, keep the spirit alive.